he is a print machinist.
Yep.
And he's actually done CrossFit for 8-9 years, roughly. Pretty much as long as me. And he is a gardener as well. You can find him on Instagram under @urbanfarmer2570. That's the postcode down in Camden, where in the area where he lives. Justin, welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me.
My first question I thought of yesterday, and I have a great one. What is the last meal that you made with something that you grew yourself?
I didn't make it.
You ate it?
I ate it. My wife made a lasagna using all the eggplants that I'm growing at the moment.
I've seen you guys have quite a few of them, yeah?
Yeah. So you tend to adjust your cooking to what you're growing at that time of year. And at the moment, I have an excess of eggplant and capsicum. So I tend to find a lot of the meals that we're cooking have eggplant or capsicums.
I'm a big fan of both of those. I'm very jealous. It must be incredible just eating some of your own produce. But back to what I said before with your eggplants, so when we buy them at Woolies or Coles, they all look kind of very similar in color and
They're
stuff.
perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
How does your eggplants look like?
Eggplant do not differ too much to what you probably find in the shops. It's your more fragile vegetables, say like tomatoes and stuff. You'll find there's a big difference to what you grow at home to what you actually purchase in a shop. And basically, what you're buying at Woolworths is grown for shelf life, not so much flavour these days. So tomatoes, for example, they're grown to sit on a shelf for a week before you purchase them and eat them. A lot of the varieties of tomatoes and other vegetables that you can grow at home are basically grown to be consumed that day that you pick them, and the flavour rings true when you eat them.
Yeah. So, we have worked with some other people that are doing home gardening, and that's the first thing they say is their tomatoes taste so different to the ones you buy in the store.
Yeah. So even things like asparagus, that for me, you haven't tasted asparagus until you've had homegrown asparagus. It tastes amazing fresh, and it's not something that I eat a lot of or particularly want to eat. But once you've eaten it fresh, you can eat it raw. You can cook it
raw as well.
Yeah,
wow.
Actually, raw it tastes like pea.
Like peas.
So
yeah.
We actually had we have a big festival down at the Camden Community Garden, next door at Camden Town Farm, called Taste Festival, and we got a lot of celebrity chefs come down. So last year we had Fast Ed. A couple of years before that we had Miguel. So they like to come and do a tour of the garden and basically pinch produce off the gardeners. And I had Miguel there a couple of years ago, and he was basically ripping out all my asparagus because he couldn't believe how good it tasted.
That's amazing. I haven't tasted that in a homegrown garden. I've been lucky enough to taste homegrown tomatoes with some of the people that we've been to. But what would you generally do with asparagus then that you pick yourself when you cook it at home? Or what would your wife do?
Most of the veggies I grow, we basically steam. A lot of people grow vegetables because they see them in a nursery or whatnot as seedlings, and they just go, "Oh, I'll grow that." That's what a lot of people do when they start out, but they grow a lot of vegetables that they don't actually eat, if that makes sense. It sounds silly, and I've been guilty of it before. You just grow stuff, and then you grow it, and you think to yourself, well, I don't actually eat a lot of this.
Give me an example of what you've grown that you didn't eat as much of.
Mountain corn. Is this amazingly coloured corn. It's all the colours of the rainbow. People that see it go, I've never realised you can get red corn, and it's red and purple and yellow and black. And
it looks like a corn cob?
Yeah, it's exactly like corn.
Oh, wow. But
it's almost inedible. It tastes horrible. But it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the different corn kernels in the one cob have different colors, or do they all?
Yeah, so one corn cob could have 6 or 7 different colors.
Wow, I've never seen that.
Yeah, you won't see that in the shops because it tastes pretty ordinary.
Yeah, okay.
So actually the Native Americans grew it more so to turn it into flour. So they grind it down when it's dry, and they use it to make a starchy sort of bread type.
Corn tortilla, maybe something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. It's not to be steamed and eaten.
Okay. Yeah. So take me back a little bit here, because now you're a fairly well-established gardener, I would say. I mean, you've said yourself that you're self-taught, but I think now you have quite a few years experience behind your back. You're definitely better than your average person. I think you're roughly around, 20,000 people are following your journey on Instagram, which is incredible. But how did you decide that you wanted to start gardening?
We'll start at the beginning. When I was really young, I was born and grew up on a farm until I was about 5.
What type of farm?
I would say small-scale mixed farming. So my dad was Italian, my mum's Australian. I don't know if it's a typical Italian thing, but grew a lot of their own vegetables and to the point where they sold stuff at markets and stuff. We had cows and sheep and probably a couple acres of vegetable patch. My dad passed away when I was 5, so obviously mum couldn't look after the farm, so we then moved from the farm to Narellan at the time. So growing up on the farm and growing things and just being around vegetables and stuff, I really sort of missed that. So I was always growing things at home. Just going to, we moved to a house block, so I was always growing things in pots and stuff, and that's sort of where it started. And then as a kid, I always had a little veggie patch around the side, just growing tomatoes and spinach, just stuff that's easy to grow. And it's just sort of stuck with me throughout my life. Obviously, in my late teens and early 20s, gardening probably wasn't my main priority, so I sort of not drifted away from it, but just I didn't really participate in it.
Yeah.
Bought my first house fairly young, and one of the first things I did when I moved in was basically plant an orchard and build a really nice vegetable patch, and that was all done in a 580 square metre block. So literally half the backyard was fruit trees and chicken coop, vegetables, and in that small space I was growing a lot of produce that I was consuming.
Yeah.
And that was what shocked me, was that you don't need a lot of space to grow a lot of your own veg.
And have chickens.
And have chickens, yeah.
How many chickens did you have?
I started with 2, and then it quickly increased to about 4 or 5. So, yeah.
Amazing.
And 4 or 5 chickens was more than enough eggs for me, and I ended up just giving them away in the end.
Do they generally lay 1 egg a day?
Yeah, certain breeds are developed to lay more. So stuff
more than 1 a day.
Yeah, so like 1 a day throughout the year.
Yep.
So you're genetically modified or genetically bred, chickens like your Isa Browns and stuff, which is like a hybrid, which is developed to lay eggs. They're very short-lived. They only live for about 3 or 4 years, but they are very good layers.
Wow.
They're not very social, so they don't mix with other chickens all that great.
Yeah.
So a lot of the chickens that I've had in the past and actually have now down at the community garden are heritage breeds. So they're basically developed for a mixture of things, whether it be egg production or a mixture of egg and meat production. So I don't harvest them for meat at all. So I just use them for the eggs.
Yeah. Okay, so you jumped on a great point there now, which is kind of the main topic I wanted to talk to you about, because you moved from having your garden space at home, but also you went into Camden Community Garden.
Yeah. So that basically was born out of necessity in the beginning. I ran out of room at home and I needed more space. And I drove past the community garden one day and seen there was a phone number on the gate, rang the phone number, got involved.
Who picked up?
Actually, my mate Steve. So he's the president, or he's my mate now.
Yeah.
He's the president of the community garden, and the community garden was started on land which was donated to Camden Council by a farmer who passed away, and basically gave I think it's 90 acres or something of river flats to the local government, and on the proviso that it wasn't ever to be developed, and it was only to be used for the community. So the soil down there is super rich. It actually used to be a dairy, a working dairy. So my mum told me when she was young, she grew up around Concord. She actually came out to Camden to visit the dairy, because Camden was obviously the edge of the earth back then. It probably still is for a lot of people.
For some of us who's been out there.
So yeah, she actually went on an excursion out to this dairy because it was the first rotolactic dairy in Australia or something, and it was, cutting edge technology. And so where the community garden is now, that's where that dairy was. So the soil is amazing. You basically just plant stuff and it grows.
Explain to me how a community garden works, because before we met you, which was actually the first shoot that I did at a community garden, I knew nothing about it, and you obviously explained me a bit to me then. But we went out to Camden, to the Camden Community Garden, because it's a really nice one. Like you said, it's pretty big, it's well kept. But coming back, we realized there's community gardens all over the place. There's one in Manly, there's one in Brookvale. So it's for those who are looking for it, it can be fairly accessible. And how does the system work?
So in our particular community garden, all the work is volunteer-based. There isn't a paid keeper of the garden. So all the work that's done is done by volunteers, such as myself or members.
And Steve.
So we basically have a working bee once a month, which is completely voluntary. But everyone wants to lend in and help out and maintain the gardens. So, yeah, it's basically just maintained by volunteers.
And then do you, as someone who wants to use the garden and grow your own produce, do you rent a space, or what options are there?
Yeah, so we have gardening members and non-gardening members, and it's a different membership. So a non-gardening member gives you access to the communal areas of the garden, so access to the herb patches, which are quite large, and access to the communal veggie growing areas. And basically all they ask is for $2 a year that'll give you access to all the herbs that you ever want.
$2 a year.
$2 a year. They just ask that you pitch in at the working bees. And then there's a gardening membership. So you rent out a plot which is about 2.5 metres by 5 metres. And that costs about $100 a year or $2 a week.
Yeah. And you have 2 plots?
I have 2 plots, yeah.
And then there's also chickens at the community garden. And bees? Well, let's do one thing at a time. It's probably big topics. Let's talk about the chickens there. How does that work?
Okay, the chickens came about. We had a chicken coop when I became a member of the garden, and it looked like a bit of a haunted house. I remember first seeing it. There was goats standing on top of it. The roof had fallen in. There was no...
Wait, a goat standing on top of it?
Yeah, and this chicken coop was probably 2.5 metres tall. So how it got up there, I don't know. But there was no chickens at the time.
Yeah.
I spoke to Steve about it, and I'm like, what's the go with the chicken coop? And he goes, we can't keep the foxes out. So no more chickens. Yeah. And I was like, that's a shame, I sold my house that I was living at, and the new place that we're moving to, my wife asked me, do you mind if we don't turn the backyard into a working farm? And she's pretty good with most things. She gives me a bit of leeway with a lot of stuff. And I said, you know what? It's a beautiful house, beautiful gardens, nice and simple. I'll do all that sort of stuff down at the garden, because at this point I had 2 plots. So I had plenty of space down there. I said, yeah, no worries. So I spoke to Steve about the chickens that I had at home. I said, how about we rip the chicken coop down and we build a new chicken coop. At the time, there was an old high school across the road which was being demolished. So we got onto the developers and they said, you can come in and take whatever you want. If you can carry it, you can have it, basically. So myself and Steve, this is a funny story actually, myself and Steve, went in there and we're pulling bits and pieces apart and stealing cricket nets and, not stealing, but cutting up cricket nets and all these posts and stuff. And we're throwing it over the fence because we didn't have a lock for this particular gate which was closest to the garden. So we're throwing all this stuff over the fence, and I've seen some cars driving past and I'm like,
looks a bit dodgy.
That must look a bit dodgy. So by the time we walked around the front of the school and then came out the back to where we'd thrown all this stuff, sure enough, there's 2 cop cars there waiting. And me and Steve had a bit of a laugh and walked up to the cops and I said, I think you're looking for me. And they said, why would we be looking for you? I said, this is all my rubbish here. And they said, we are looking for you. What are you doing? And I told them, I said, we've got permission, blah, blah, blah. So they rang the phone number that we had for the people demolishing the school, and it was all sorted out. And Steve was like, you would have to be the worst criminal ever. You actually said, I think you're looking for me. So it was just good that we had all access to all the stuff that we needed.
Yeah.
And over about a course of a month, we built a new chicken coop, and as we like to call it, fox-proofed it. So we haven't lost a single chicken in the coop to a fox yet. So
yeah, how do you fox-proof it? So the way the chicken coop looks, it's basically like a square box of fencing to me. That's how I would describe it. But I guess a fox can dig quite deep to get through there.
Yeah, so that's where the cricket nets came into it. We basically cut up the cricket nets and lined the entire floor with that mesh that you would find on a cricket net. But in saying that, we actually haven't had anything try and dig their way in yet. So it might have actually been a bit of overkill, but if something does try to dig under and up, it won't happen.
Yeah.
So we line the floor with mulch from a local arborist company. And what happens is that mulch, over a course of probably 3 months, and like this is pretty thick wood chip, with the chickens, soiling it, it gets wet by rain and stuff. It actually breaks down really quick. And that soil then gets put into compost heaps. And yeah, the soil that we get out of that chicken coop is amazing.
Yeah, wow.
For growing veggies and stuff. So it all works hand in hand.
Yep.
Everything sort of has a purpose in the garden, which is really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How about snakes in that area? Do they go after the chickens?
We lost a chick to a red-bellied black snake about 3 years ago. So we got our hands on some heritage breed chicks from a breeder at Galston. So that was another time I drove to the edge of the earth on a Friday afternoon.
To collect chickens?
So we actually had a broody hen. So a broody hen is a hen that gets all the motherly instincts and wants to sit on eggs, but we didn't have a rooster. So they go broody. Some breeds go broody once a year. And rather than let her sit on eggs, which were never going to hatch, we just got some day-old chicks and popped them underneath. And she raised them as her own. So they're all, matured now. And I basically bought those breeds with the intention of getting different coloured eggs, because people don't know that you can get chickens that lay blue eggs or green eggs or olive-coloured eggs. You can get chickens that lay chocolate-coloured eggs.
Yeah. That was amazing, because you showed us that when we were out there, and seeing 12 eggs in a pack from your chickens. Yeah. They were all different colours.
Yeah,
it looks amazing.
It's quite cool. And, what I like about, gardening and growing different things, it's what we were talking about earlier, like CrossFit, you show something new to people and they're amazed, and people think that, chickens lay, light coloured brown eggs or white eggs, but then you say, no, they lay green eggs or blue eggs or white eggs, and it just opens people's eyes up and minds to different things. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's crazy in our time that, people my age, 30 plus, they've never seen that. I can't remember having seen that. And I grew up on the countryside when I was younger, and I can't remember seeing those colored eggs at all. It's weird. And I think about it often when you see kids and they meet animals for the first time. And I don't mean cats or dogs, like home pets, but the first time they see a chicken in real life or a cow in real life, it's like, that's a pretty unique experience. Yeah. And I think it's going away more and more, especially in a big city like Sydney.
Yeah. And even out our way, like we're right on the edge of urban sprawl. So we're sort of at that point now where the burbs have caught up and sort of are about to start overtaking our area.
People go out there to buy a house they can afford.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, every Saturday when they have the farmers markets next door to the garden, which brings a lot of visitors to the garden, you know, the chicken coop's just surrounded by kids.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I love
it's
that.
awesome,
I love seeing, you know, just how kids are engaged in the chickens, because a lot of them, it probably sounds silly, have never seen a chicken. And then, like, if I'm around, I'll show them the eggs and the different coloured eggs, and they're just like absolutely amazed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's good.
Do you want to get any other animals there at the community garden? Could you get pigs there maybe, or no?
Yeah, I don't know about pigs. The issue with animal husbandry there is, you know, you really have to have people who are dedicated to keeping them. So the chickens work really well because I live 2 minutes up the road. Steve lives 2 minutes in the other direction, and between the two of us, they're always fed, they're always watered. The town farm, which is part of, so the Camden Community Garden is part of Camden Town Farm. It's like an offshoot, but we're all on the same bit of land. They adjust cattle on all the land. But as far as the garden and animal husbandry goes, if that served a purpose, so I think the goats were there to basically keep the grass down. And with all this rain, a couple of goats would be pretty handy at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine it's overgrown there right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's we've gone from one extreme to the other in a month. So.
Yeah, craziest summer in a long time.
Unbelievable.
Having that drought and I mean, you tell me about it, because you must see it more because you're so hands-on in a garden all the time. What has this summer been like?
It's just been a summer of extremes. So a month ago, you know, I'd walk down to the chicken coop and the ground wasn't even crunchy anymore because there was no grass. It was basically just dirt.
It was just brown up there.
It was just brown.
Yeah.
You know, we got a little bit of rain, you know, and the weeds are always the first thing to pop up, and you're like, oh, it's better than nothing. And then you just have the deluge that we've had leading up to this week. And yesterday we're mowing grass that's over a foot high. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So,
did you measure the rain out there at all?
Yeah. So up till this week, we'd had about 300 mils. So I just got my hands on two HoseLink hose gauges.
Oh, you got the rain gauge.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've got one at home.
You got 300 mils in that.
So
does it go to 300?
It goes to 140 or 160, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was one night that we got over 140. So basically, you can't sort of say, oh, we had, you know, 30 mils last night and you haven't checked it for a week. So I'm down there most days. So I was emptying it, you know, after a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
And it was, so I was the one at home I was emptying in the mornings, and one down the garden, because I do most of my gardening down there at night time when my daughter goes to bed. That's my little free time. So as soon as she goes down to bed, I just duck down the road for half an hour, do what needs to be done. And that's when I was checking that one. But yeah, up until this week, in the last 2 weeks, we probably had 300 mil. So it's crazy.
Did you get any flooding up there?
Yeah, we did.
Because you have a creek running just down from the main area of the garden.
Yeah,
right?
So that creek was actually did dry out. It runs into a lagoon, and the lagoon dried out.
Wow.
Earlier this year, I think it was.
Yeah, after December, January.
Yeah, and to put that into perspective, there was fish in that lagoon that were, I ain't saying that they're only carp, but still they were fish, and they would have been probably 5 kilos. Like, they were huge.
What?
So they'd been there for a long time.
And that whole thing dried out?
And that whole thing dried out.
Where do they go?
So the river
is
a couple of 100 metres behind us. So during a flood, they get washed up, and then they basically get landlocked in a lagoon. But that lagoon dried out for the first time I've been gardening down there. And then we had a little bit of rain in spring, which was good. And then it got really, really hot. And so there was still a little bit of water in there. But then this week we actually had to move some beehives
because they're quite far down,
due to flooding.
Yeah.
Where they're located, they're actually in sort of like a stormwater runoff area, which if you get 50 mil overnight, they're fine. But when you get a consistent downpour for a week or so, that area becomes flooded. And that's the first time we've had to move hives down there in 3 or 4 years. So, yeah.
So tell me about that, because you have, I think, 4 or 5 beehives there, and they're, I mean, for someone who doesn't know what a beehive looks like, it's like a big, quite tall box, I'd say maybe 1.5 meters, 2 meters tall.
Yeah, it depends on how established your colony is. So a bee box that's basically a square box.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say it's easy to move though.
Oh God, no. A big hive would weigh over 100 kilos.
So when did you realize you had to move it, and how much water with it? Tell me about what happened.
So when we had the big floods out there, I think it was 2016, we actually lost, and this was before, actually I just started beekeeping. I got involved in beekeeping through the garden. I think Steve needed an extra pair of hands, and I've always been of curious nature, so
yeah,
it was just a natural progression for me. So I got involved in beekeeping through the garden and bought my first hive, and I was all eager and stuff. And in 2016, we actually lost 2 or 3 hives out there due to flooding.
So they just got washed away?
Yeah, so basically the water reaches the bottom of the hive where the entrance is, and once it gets above that, it just obviously starts filling up the hive. So,
dang.
Yeah, it was unfortunate.
Yeah.
So,
do they just relocate then, the bees?
Well, they actually get stuck.
They can't fly away.
No, they can't.
In the rain.
Because there's only one entrance. Yeah, so it's really devastating. So actually recently, a couple of weeks ago, a beekeeper out at Hawkesbury lost 23 hives in the floods. They just all got washed away, which is really sad.
Yeah.
Especially like 23 hives, that's almost a business sort of size amount of hives. So that's someone's livelihood that's just been washed away, unfortunately. But yeah, the beekeeping came about just, I think, from Steve needing a hand in the garden with taking care of all the bees. So we, all my hives bar one, so I actually have 8 hives now at different locations. So 4 of them are out at the Oaks, and 4 of them are at the garden. And all bar one are just colonies that I've actually caught. So around springtime, especially like October is swarming season, November, I get calls out to relocate swarms. So
do you mean a call from a private person that have bees at their house or something? Yeah.
So you see it all the time. People put a post on Facebook, I've got a bunch of bees attached to a tree in my backyard. What do I do?
You put your hand up and
I
you're
basically
say,
I'm registered with the DPI. So to become a beekeeper, you have to be registered with the Department of Industries. And that's because it is a really important industry, pollination and the honey industry, obviously. So you do need to go about becoming a beekeeper and doing it the right way, or a responsible way, I should say. So I just see stuff on Facebook, and
so tell me about ones when
rather than call an exterminator. Rather than call an exterminator, I'm the other option.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
So you go and collect the beehive and put it in your car, or how does it work?
Yeah. So I basically take a hive with me to the colony. So the colony is basically just a huge ball of bees, and it can range from anything the size of, we'll say, a rock melon, to, a watermelon. Yeah. Sort of a large watermelon-sized group of bees.
And you bring an empty hive with you?
So I take an empty hive with me and basically go about putting that ball of bees into the box.
How? Do they go in there pretty...
So there's different ways of doing it. You can catch the queen and just put the queen in there. I'm absolutely useless at locating queens. My eyes are terrible. And it's like a game of Where's Wally, and I'm useless at it. Yeah. I cannot locate queens.
Is it difficult to spot the difference between a normal bee and the queen?
The queen is about 2.5 times the size of a regular bee.
Whoa.
Sorry, 2.5 times the length.
Yeah.
So she does stick out once you see her. You can't not see her.
Yeah.
But, if you've got a box of bees and, there could be 40,000 bees in a colony, so you get down to your brood box where the queen's located,
they're all attacking you, yeah?
Sometimes. Yeah. It depends. Every hive has different characteristics.
So if you're messing with the queen, I assume they would go
They
nuts.
do get annoyed. The closer you get to the queen, they they get a bit annoyed. So, but different colonies have different characteristics. So my hives out at the Oaks aren't great with people. So it's good that they're out there.
I won't go out there shooting anything
away from people because they're super angry.
Yeah.
Whereas my ones at the garden, they're pretty calm. They're okay. So
yeah, I was surprised when we were there because I can't remember if it was you or Steve that told me, but as long as I was filming on the side and not staying in front of them, they were like, I mean, they didn't even get close to me, really.
No, they don't care you're there. If you approach a beehive, if you ever see bees, you know, swarming or whatnot, they're not there to sting you. You can, you know, we don't recommend it, obviously, but you can walk right up to a swarm colony and they're going to leave you alone. They don't want to sting you.
Obviously, you want to be extra careful, I think, if you're allergic to it or something.
Obviously, yeah. If you're allergic, beekeeping probably isn't for you.
Yeah. You've been stung a few times?
Yeah. Actually, I was joking about it earlier this week to someone saying I'm the worst dad in the world because my daughter's actually been stung this season and I haven't.
No, and she's 2, yeah?
She's 2. So, I know. I felt pretty bad about that. I just done a harvest out at the Oaks and I was walking in the back paddock where they're located and I was probably 100 metres from these hives, but I just harvested, so they're pretty rolled up. And I had my daughter in my arms and I seen this bee from about 5 metres away and it just went, bang.
Straight forward.
Stung her straight in the head. And I'm like,
oh, in the head.
Oh, like on her hair.
Poor thing.
And she didn't know what happened. She sort of just looked at the top of her head and she's like, oh, and then she screamed for about 5 seconds and I scraped the sting out. And that's a big thing as well. If you do get stung by a bee, scrape it, don't pull it out. So when you pull a bee sting out, it actually injects more venom. Oh. Whereas if you scrape it out, it just takes it straight out and there's no venom injected. So
how do you scrape it?
Find something sharp.
Okay.
So if you've got like longish nails or
your key
like
maybe?
A key, yeah. So I actually think I used a key on Millie's head. And yeah, she took it like a little champion.
She might be a beekeeper one day as well. Yeah. So yeah, take me back to this recent massive flooding and rain that we had, and you and Steve had to move these 100-kilo hives. I think I saw some stuff on your Instagram. There was, at least a foot of water there.
Yeah,
right?
so
you had to carry them.
It was knee deep water. So
knee deep.
Yeah.
Dang.
So I was actually lucky with that big hive down at the garden because we'd actually done a harvest earlier, probably a week earlier. So I took probably 25 kilos of honey off that colony, which was great. Otherwise,
25 kilos. That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, that's a good harvest. I sell my honey at 2 local retail outlets in Camden. One's like a providor and one's like a hamper company. And
explain that. What do those 2 words mean?
So providor is someone who basically sells food, different types of food. I'd say almost exotic foods.
Okay.
A lot of exquisite like meats and cheeses and stuff, and just real artisan type brands of food. Stuff that's not mass produced but made by small producers. So it's made with sort of like love, and it's a different type of food. It's really
not mass production.
No, not mass production at all. And the hamper company is like a local company that sort of specialises in local small scale producers.
Yep.
So basically I sell my honey at those 2 places, and my brand of honey is called Montpelier Gold.
Montpelier Gold.
Yeah. So that name came about because out at the Oaks where I first started my beekeeping, the road is called Montpelier Drive. And it's actually my in-laws' property. So as an ode to them and the location, I was like, Montpelier Gold.
It sounds very fancy.
Yeah.
I'll have to say this, because a couple of years ago I learned, I can't remember who told me, but I get a fair bit of hay fever. I especially got it when I lived in Melbourne, and when I came back to Sydney, it still kind of stuck around a little bit. And one of the big recommendations that I got was to eat local honey.
100%.
It helps with the hay fever, and it definitely did. That's amazing. Hey,
honey contains minute traces of pollen, and the thing with hay fever, and I'm not a doctor or anything, but I don't suffer from hay fever, but this is what I've been told by people who have suffered from hay fever, is you're not allergic, but you're sensitive to pollen that's local to your area. So if you can
100%.
find a local beekeeper who sells raw honey, it contains small traces of pollen, which is local to your area. You actually build up a tolerance to that pollen that's in your area. So
I'm no doctor or scientist either, but it definitely helped me. But what I found is that you have to try and find the most local honey you can find. Like literally around in your area.
You would be surprised how many local beekeepers there are now. It's something that in the last couple of years has just absolutely exploded.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of flow hives. There's a new type of hive that's just sort of hit the market in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. A couple of guys in Byron Bay developed this hive that you can walk up to it and turn a tap and the honey just flows out the back.
Wow.
It's good for backyard setups. I know people who have got them with mixed results, but it's a different way of doing it, and it's bringing a lot of people into beekeeping and making people more aware of, the plight of what's going on with bees at the moment, especially not so much in Australia, but in America, especially in Europe. Their bee populations are just getting decimated by
declining
disease and pesticides, and even services such as pollination. For example, and these figures blow people's minds. The almond industry in Australia is basically in South Australia. That's where the majority of our almonds are grown. Almonds need to be pollinated within a 2-week window. In this 2-week period in South Australia, in the Riverina area down there, they use, at the moment, 100,000 beehives to pollinate almond crops.
Must be billions of bees.
Oh, it's mind-boggling. And that number in the next 10 years is going to increase to 170,000 hives.
Wow.
That need to be trucked there. So obviously transportation, it knocks them around, and even having that single source of pollen, because the bees are basically there just to collect pollen and pollinate the almond crops. Even that, just that single source of protein, it's not actually good for the bees. So it actually knocks them around. So, I actually cop a little bit of hate.
What, online? That's surprising.
From vegans. And I've got nothing against vegans, but I do cop a little bit of hate from some vegans. Some of my really close friends are vegans, so like I said, I got nothing against vegans, but they send me messages, DMs, how can you say save the bees when you're exploiting them? And I'm like,
whoa.
Yeah, there's some angry people out there.
Yeah, vegans, we should say a small percentage of people that are vegan are very loud online.
Yeah.
Very loud. And it's less than 1% of who people
I agree
are
totally.
You shouldn't take too much heat to them.
And I sort of say, and I used to get a bit sort of annoyed by it, and I'm like, okay, next time I have to do a cutout out of a Telstra pit, I'll get you to do it.
Yeah.
At 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, if you're that hell bent on saving the bees, because I'm the other option to an exterminator.
Yeah, it's easy to sit on the high horse and judge others, but you got to look at yourself first.
I think they've got good intentions.
Yeah,
but sometimes those intentions are misguided. So.
But that's super interesting what you're saying there. I had no idea, because the almond industry surely is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because we're all going more and more plant-based, really. I think all of us.
And that's a good thing, 100%.
Yeah, not necessarily that we're vegan or vegetarian, but I mean, I pretty much only have almond milk now, and I used to have dairy milk, and that's been a gradual change over the last 3 to 5 years. And you can see now the selection of almond milk in the stores is ginormous, whereas the dairy farmers are suffering from it. So it's a tough balance. That's for sure.
I try not to be too loud in my opinions, especially through my Instagram account, because I always find that you open yourself up to being called a hypocrite, which I don't want to be that person. You know, I don't want to put myself out there and say, you know, everyone should be growing their own vegetables, because everyone can't. Yeah. If you can, it's a great thing to do. You know, what works for me doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
You know,
but you can't look at it too much like that, I think. And the way I view it is, if you know, take you as an example, through your Instagram account, which I think is awesome. It's very informative. You learn a lot about gardening. You get to see hands-on what you're doing. If you inspire one person or 5 people to try at least gardening in their own space, if they have the opportunity, that's awesome. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be that big of a number, but you're inspiring someone, right? Yeah. It can make a change in their life. That's what you got to look at and focus on, and not the 2 people that scream the loudest that you're a hypocrite. That's madness. Yeah. That's people that don't have anything to do at home.
One of the coaches at Narellan, he actually said to me when it sort of started taking off, it wasn't something that I took all that seriously. And I guess I still don't take it too serious, the Instagram side of things. But when it did start taking off, he actually said to me, he goes, "It's really good what you're doing." And I was like, "Oh,
I agree.
Why is that?" And he goes, "Because it's a positive lifestyle influence on people." He goes, "There's nothing negative about it." He goes, "You know, you're encouraging people to get outside and grow their own food and you know, introduce them to fresh food." And he goes, "It's only a good thing for people to, you know, be influenced by." And when he said that, I was like, "Oh, yeah, you know, you're probably right." I never really looked at it like that. I just sort of started the account because I think a lot of my immediate friends and family got sick of me posting stuff on Facebook, which I don't. You know, I think I'm like most people these days. I hardly use Facebook. And one of the things that sort of got me away from that was the negativity that was always, you know, on Facebook. And whereas I find that Instagram, there's a lot less of that. You can detach yourself from it quite easily.
People choose who to follow. That's exactly right. If people get upset about your account, which I find mind-boggling that someone would get upset about your account, but they can just unfollow you.
That's exactly right.
It's very easy. And like your trainer said, it's such a positive message through it. It's not like you're showing off your butt and selling skinny tea or something like that. There's way worse stuff out there that I wouldn't mind so much if people try to police a bit more. But that's, it's a super positive thing. With your, I wanted to touch base a little bit with your training as well, because you've done CrossFit for so long and you've kind of kept it up, which is amazing, because I generally see people kind of fall off the bandwagon a little bit after maybe 5 or 6 years because it is different. How is your training now, and how do you balance that with your lifestyle, with your work, your family and everything?
I'm probably getting to the gym 3 times a week. I would love to get there more if I could, but having a young family, I've got a daughter who's almost 2. My wife's 20 weeks pregnant at the moment. Yeah, obviously priorities change over the years. So I actually started CrossFit quite late, I guess, in age. I guess I started when I was about 28. So that was in 2011. I started dabbling. Joined a gym in 2012. And I've actually been doing it ever since. I've never actually not been training
same as me.
In that time. So I actually, I mentioned it when you came to the Camden Community Garden that day. I actually recognised you and I think you're a bit taken back. And I'm like, I remember you at 2011 regionals at Homebush, and you were like, wow, how long have you been doing CrossFit? Yeah. And all I remember from that day was I actually don't think I was doing CrossFit. I don't think I was a member at a CrossFit gym then, but I was sort of interested, and I went to the regionals, and all I took away from it was everyone's super fit and everyone eats tuna. Everyone just had cans of tuna everywhere.
Man, that is so true. That is not the way now. I haven't had a can of tuna in forever. And that's right. I forgot about that.
I hated tuna. And then when I started like really getting serious about CrossFit, I was like, into the tuna every day.
I used to do the same, especially when those small tins were on sale, like half price or whatever. You just buy 20 of them because it was such an easy protein snack. But oh man, that was silly. I definitely wouldn't go back to that type of diet. That's for sure. But yeah, how did you? Tell me how you found, like, how did you discover CrossFit and what did you do in the beginning? I think that's a bit of a funny story.
I found CrossFit through a mate at my mate Ryan Maslin. A lot of
he's OG. Yeah.
So Ryan started doing CrossFit workouts. We were living together at the time, and
you were housemates with Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So we were living together at the time, and Ryan at the time was probably an athletic 95 kilos, and
he's tall, dude.
Yeah, and he's solid. When I left school, I was probably about 67 kilos, so I've always been pretty slim.
Yeah.
So at the time, I think I was probably about 82 kilos, and I'd worked hard to get to that weight because I'm a hard gainer. I'm super hard gainer.
You were eating a lot of cans of tuna.
Anyway, so Ryan started doing CrossFit, and he stripped weight straight away.
Yeah.
He was down the high 80s, and I was just like, I don't want to do CrossFit if that's what's going to happen to me.
You were worried about losing weight.
Yeah, I was worried about losing weight because I tried so hard for so long to put it on.
You're like me, yeah.
And and then he started doing workouts at the gym, and we sort of stopped training together because he was just doing CrossFit stuff, and I was just doing your usual Globo gym sort of movements.
Were you a member at a normal like Fitness First or something?
Yeah, so I was a member at a gym out at Campbelltown called Aquafit, and then he sort of left the gym and started. He joined a local CrossFit gym, and he's actually he's been a coach there ever since. And I started doing workouts at the gym I was at,
Aquafit,
and so yeah.
What workouts did you do?
Friday night was Helen night.
Every Friday
night. So every Friday night I put my towel on a treadmill and I'd leave it running because I didn't want to lose time.
So you did the 400-meter run on the treadmill.
So where the pull-up rigs were, they were like 5 meters from the treadmill, and I put a 24 kilo kettlebell in between, and people would go near your treadmill and you'd be like, "Get off!" And wow. I remember I was doing butterfly pull-ups before I even joined a CrossFit gym.
Wow.
So when I joined like an actual gym, and I've just like rocked up because I was doing Helen every week, and I'm just like punching out butterflies. They're like, this guy's hectic.
Wow.
But I honestly feel like I've actually been on a plateau since that point.
Why did you pick Helen though?
I think it was because I was good at it.
Okay.
So I was doing Helen, and then I started doing Grace. So, and when I say doing Grace, I was doing 30 strict,
like clean and presses.
Yeah. And
wow.
And that was with like typical, gym weights. So they weren't
back then, yeah.
So you couldn't drop them. Like
no bumper plates.
Technique was horrendous.
Wow.
And then I started doing muscle ups, and I actually had a set of rings at this gym, but I'd have to throw them at least like 5 meters into the air and put them over this bit of roofing reinforcement, which probably wasn't safe. And here's me punching out muscle ups and stuff. And people were just like looking at me going, "What are you doing?" So,
did you get kicked out?
Yeah, the rings, after a few times, they said, "You've got to stop doing that because whilst you're competent, other people see you doing that.
They want to try.
And they want to do it."
Yeah. With your Helen, Friday night Helen, did you try and beat your time every Friday?
Oh, yeah. So
that must have been rough.
I think I got down to about a 750 in the end. And now I'm like not even close to that. Like,
but it's also different on the treadmill though.
Yeah, it's so depressing.
Yeah.
So once I joined a CrossFit gym, and I was always around flat 8, but I never got back to those lofty 7s, which I was just devastated about.
I reckon there's about a minute in that treadmill.
Yeah.
You got to remember that thing moves by itself. Whereas when you run out on the street, it can be rough when you're fatigued.
Like most people, I went through the CrossFit honeymoon, lived and breathed it.
Yeah.
So I was a single guy, young, living with my mates. We just basically lived to train for a period of time.
Who was your favorite CrossFitter back then?
I like Graham Holmberg,
Yep.
Dark Horse.
Yep.
So I used to wear my Dark Horse Rogue shirt with pride.
That was a sick shirt.
And then
I had that as well.
That was the there was like the original one, which was like an olive color, and then there was like Dark Horse 2, which was like a black one. And
I didn't
it had
have
like
that one.
had like a horse on it, and I literally paid like $75 to get this shirt from America because I couldn't get it in Australia.
Oh, I can't remember that second one. I had exactly the same first one. It had the black horse on the back. Yeah, that was sick. We actually met him.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, he came to Sydney and we did a shoot up at CrossFit North at the time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he was awesome, super friendly, but yeah, he was a bit of a beast.
I think, and I love Chad Mackay.
Yeah, can't go wrong with Chad.
Actually, like I was saying, living and breathing it. I judged at 2012 regionals down. That was, I think, the first one at Wollongong. Mm-hmm. First or second? Oh, yeah.
I think the first.
I think it might have been the first.
Yeah, first in Wollongong.
And absolutely loved it. I was just blown away. Like,
did you judge Chad?
Nah, I didn't. I was supposed to. Like, I was going to. And then something happened.
Yeah.
And I was just but I felt like the judging, it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
There was this American guy that came out, Brad, and he was like full screaming at us, and I was just like, oh, you know what, like this is like full on, like this is crazy.
They're running like an army showdown there.
Yeah, it was. Oh, I guess it had to be. Obviously, it's the peak of CrossFit at the time in Australia, and it was full on, but it was good at being up and close. But even like the team events, I was talking to the athletes through the workout, and I remember judging this team, and I think it was like 35 kilo dumbbell snatches for the girls.
Yeah.
And I was just like blown away. Like I hadn't done a 35 kilo dumbbell snatch at that time.
So heavy.
And here's this poor thing. She's 55 kilos trying to dumbbell snatch her, 2/3 of her body weight, and she couldn't do it. And she broke down, and I was like, almost like a counselor / judge for the whole workout, because the team then got eliminated because she couldn't do it.
And she was out there by herself in that one, because it was very like, it was only one male, one female.
Yeah, and I was absolutely devastated for her. I felt so bad.
Yeah. We had Philippa Robinson on our team, and she absolutely demolished that dumbbell. She probably did better with that weight than I could have done. Yeah. Yeah,
I loved it back then, and
so fun.
I lived for comps. Like everybody did.
Did you do any comps?
Yeah, so I used to love Riot.
Yeah, up in Gosford.
Gosford.
Yes.
Ben Tilley runs a good comp.
Yeah.
And that was actually probably the last big one I actually did, I think. I haven't competed for years.
Yeah.
But
those days are done for me. Happily retired.
There was one at a Catholic school, and that was a 2-day event, and that was just unbelievable. It was such a good time. You go up there, you stay there for the weekend, and
it's social, right?
Yeah, and I remember we were doing like some Jerry workout. Like it was Jerry, but it was like a modified Jerry. And the rowers were on this asphalt path, and it was like 38 degrees, and asphalt felt like it was 1,000 degrees. So we did the run, and even on the first run, so we're not even like through the rowers yet, I had this guy in my heat, Joshua Santhau, who's
know him very well,
a regionals athlete.
Yep, he's still around.
He's probably 6'2". I reckon he would have been, almost 100 kilos. So here's this guy, and there was this really steep hill climb in this run, and I'm talking early on, not like towards the end of the run, early on. And he was at the bottom of the hill as I was coming down, as I was getting to the hill to go up. So he's already demolishing me in this run. And I'm looking up this hill at this guy, and he was in like a full skins bodysuit.
Oh, yeah, those days.
And honestly, he looked like he was like in like Avengers or something. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, man.
Superhero outfit.
This is not going to be good for me. Like, God. And I just remember just being absolutely deflated that early on in that workout, just like, oh, man. Yeah. Bloody hell.
That's funny.
And then he actually did really well in that comp, I think. And then I seen him at regionals maybe that year, and that made me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, he's been an individual regionals athlete a couple of times, and I think it's been in teams as well recently. But I mean, like us, he's done it for a long time. So
yeah,
as a little bit over the hill right now.
As like, I'm not obviously I'm not a big guy. I'm not a small guy. I'm that in between. But you like to think there's a trade-off. So you like to think as, you know, not being a big guy, you'll get the big guys in the body weight stuff.
Yeah, handstand push-ups or muscle-ups.
Yeah. And then when you see that sort of stuff, you're like, oh, it's just, no. It
used to be like that back in the early days, that you'd get, people were good at different stuff, but now, I mean, the top guys are great at everything. It's a reason why I put the shoes on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to round this podcast off with some tips and advice for people that want to start. I think if they, you know, listen to the first segment of this show and then watch you a bit on Instagram, it's very inspiring to try and grow something if you have a little bit of space.
Yep.
And we also see more and more products, I guess, around growing veggies at your home.
Yep.
I mean, my manager, Ben, he has a veggie pod at home, and the brand is called Veggie Pod. So it, you know, helps him to grow herbs and those kind of things. What would you say is a good starting point to get things going if you have a little bit of soil at home at least?
Don't be afraid to fail. I've been gardening my whole life. I'm 37. I've been gardening most of my life and I still fail. Sometimes things are out of your control, so just have a go. Start with things that are easy to grow, things that you eat. You know, we're coming into autumn and winter now, so that's a great time to start planting broccoli. I eat a ton of broccoli, so I grow a ton of broccoli. Stuff like, broccoli.
Tomatoes maybe, like we talked about?
Spinach. Tomatoes are sort of coming towards an end of their season now.
Okay.
But even spinach is so easy to grow. Start with stuff that's easy to grow and start with a good soil. So if you are growing in like a veggie pod or pots, which is a bit harder than growing in the ground because you need to maintain moisture, you really need a good potting mix. So don't get the 4 bags for $20 at your local Bunnings because it just dries out. Ants love it, plants hate it. So
where should you get soil from?
Oh, you can get decent potting mixes from Bunnings and stuff in your local nurseries, but
just gotta pick the more expensive ones.
You get what you pay for, basically. Compost is such a good thing for small gardens. So you can get little small composting units now that are like made out of like a PVC sort of pipe type thing. So, or your veggie scraps and stuff, you can even put them in like a veggie pod, and it's like a little sort of round 10-inch sort of pipe, and you know, with holes drilled into it, and just throwing in your veggie scraps and letting them break down will actually add to your soil and help it maintain moisture and nutrients.
So I have a question about composting. So let's say you buy one of those, compost PVC pipe type of things. Yep. Can you, when I start with that, do I just chuck veggies straight in, like leftovers, or do I have to start with a base to get the compost to start degrading?
It has to be a mix. So if you just basically put veggie scraps in, it basically turns to sludge.
Yeah, no good.
No good. So you need carbon, you need nitrogen. So carbon could be dead leaves. So coming into autumn.
I got a lot of that in my backyard.
Yeah, coming into autumn, leaves are great for adding carbon to compost heaps. So if you put a handful of carrot peels and sweet potato skins into your compost and there's leaves about, just put some leaves in on top of it. Grass clippings are okay, not a lot, but just mix it in, keep it aerated. And that's the best way to maintain soil quality as well.
So you can start with leaves, a little bit of basically the order you said.
Yeah, just keep it varied. So there is, I think, they say 30% carbon, so leaves, and 30% scraps and nitrogen and stuff. But if you just keep it constantly varied, it'll be okay.
And you can chuck eggshells in there.
Yeah, eggshells are great actually. Wash them out before you put them in there, but
oh really? You got to rinse them?
Yeah, just rinse them because you don't want to be putting egg whites and stuff into your compost, just bacteria and stuff. But I actually approached a local cafe and was getting buckets and buckets of eggshells and just crushing them up and adding them straight to my soil. They add calcium to your soil, so tomatoes use a lot of calcium. So eggshells are great to add to compost, definitely.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. So good soil. Buy the
soil.
good soil from Bunnings and start your own compost. That's kind of the
Don't be don't be afraid. Like, you might not get it right first go, but just learn from your mistakes. It's like anything, you know.
I saw your corn cob pollination on Instagram.
And the reason I put
good
that
example, right?
The reason I put that there is so people see that, oh, this guy obviously knows what he's doing, but he still has fails. And that's important for people to know, because it's all easy for people to see me growing perfect veg, but it's important that they see me fail, because everyone fails.
Yeah, those corn cobs did not look perfect.
Sometimes things are out of your control. So the reason they failed was because we had a 49-degree day, the joys of living in Western Sydney, and all the flowers that pollinate the silks of the corn basically got burnt to a crisp, which is something that is unavoidable in that situation. So I've actually had that happen on 2 occasions to 2 different plantings of corn this season. So corn for me is like the staple of my summer crops. I love growing corn. It's easy to grow. And both my crops have basically been fails. I do get a harvest off them, but they're not anything to be proud of, that's for sure.
Not that photogenic for Instagram, but it was a great example, right? Like I love that post showing that, hey, it's not always going to work. It's part of the fun as well. I guess with that, when you nail it, it's even more fulfilling.
I always say to people, just have a go. You can grow in anything. You can grow in styrofoam boxes if you can't get your hands on pots, or there's actually an account I follow up this way, a lady called Wendy, and her Instagram's up on the rooftop, and she just grows in pots, which growing in pots is a lot harder than growing in the ground. So for people growing in pots, there's options out there. You can get wicking beds now. So there's like a pot that has a water reservoir in the bottom, so it's constantly feeding water to the soil. So there's plenty of options out there.
I think that's kind of how the veggie pod works. I think you can connect your hose to it and the water comes through. Okay, my last question, is there something that you haven't grown yet that's like a dream thing that you want to have a crack at?
A giant pumpkin.
Giant pumpkins?
I've tried the last 2 years and I have dismally failed.
And you tried that at the community garden?
Yeah, so Steve grew one, and it turned out all right.
He's turned out all right, but yours was not?
He's got a space. I planted one last year and it was too late and it didn't happen. And then this year I planted some out at the Oaks, so not at the community garden, but...
secret project away from Steve?
Yeah, I don't get out there that often, so I need to give them a bit more attention. So next year, given the summer that we've had this year, I said to my wife, I'm going to grow things that don't need as much attention, so they don't need as much water, and they don't need me to sort of basically be down there every day if we get a hot day. So next year I'm going to grow a lot more pumpkins and stuff, so I think next year is going to be my year.
I feel like the pumpkin is like a classic example of, a bit of an ego competition on getting the biggest pumpkin.
100%. Oh,
that'll be very photogenic for your Instagram if you get a big one.
A lot of people don't know this, but I started getting right into my Instagram over a bet. So myself and Steve had a bet, a carton of beer.
Yeah.
Whoever gets to 1,000 followers first, the other person buys them a carton of beer.
Oh, wow.
And we were actually talking about this when we were building the chicken coop.
Yeah.
And so that's how that came about.
And you beat Steve?
I smashed him.
Yeah. Is he still on Insta?
At the time, yeah. So he's on there through the actual
Camden
Community Garden account. And at the time, he was like a couple of hundred followers in front of me, and I was just like, okay. So then it became a competition.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I have to step up my game here. And so that's how that came about.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then obviously it just evolved, and I was just like, okay, so I'll just run with this. It's something that I enjoy doing, and it's spreading a positive message. So yeah.
How long does it take for a pumpkin to grow into a decent size?
There's different varieties of pumpkins, and it sort of depends on the variety. So stuff like butternut pumpkin. Butternut pumpkin is something that a lot of people like. They're one of the smaller varieties of vines, but it's something that you'd probably plant in November and start picking now. So they do take
February
a little while to grow, probably around that 16 to 20 week mark.
And would they be the same size roughly that we see at Woolworths?
Oh, 100%, yeah. Wow. And they're quite prolific as well. So if you get a good pumpkin vine, you could get 10 or 12 butternut pumpkins off it. Yeah, so I actually really enjoy growing pumpkin because it's something that you can keep throughout the year. So I've actually got tromboncinos that I grew last year. So tromboncino is a really long type of pumpkin. And I've actually got tromboncinos in my garage that I grew last summer. Oh, wow. And they're still fine. So
they were quite big, right?
Yeah, so the longest one was just under $1.50 m. So yeah,
it's about as big as me.
Yeah, well, and obviously that turned into a competition between me and Steve. Yeah. So awesome. The next competition is Camden Show honey. So we've got all our entrants. So
is that going to be a taste thing?
Yeah, so they have
Who's got the best tasting honey
judges. I don't know how you become a honey tasting judge, but there's people that do that.
Yeah,
and you get different nectar sources and you get different flavors of honey. So I've got honey at home that's pitch black, and I've got honey at home that's really clear. And it just depends on what's in flower and your nectar sources as to what color honey you get.
But how can you, as a beekeeper, tweak the flavor of your honey?
You can relocate your hives into areas. So people move their hives, out bush into national parks and stuff, chasing yellow box and red gum. So that's, if you've ever been behind a truck that's, got 200 beehives on the back of it, that's a beekeeper chasing a nectar flow.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I had no idea.
So that's how that comes about.
Yeah.
So I don't say that people mine has a particular flavour because I don't know where my bees go.
Yeah.
So my honey is considered wildflower honey. So it's just basically a mix of whatever's in flower at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Justin, for coming on. That was a good chat, and I'm looking forward to keep an eye on your Instagram and see what you're up to throughout the year.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.